Norm Duke is one of the greatest bowlers to ever play the game. He's won 40 PBA titles, making him just the third player to reach the 40 mark. But what's most impressive is his longevity. He just kept winning year after year and even managed to win 2 titles at the age of 54. There was a period in his career where he basically was unstoppable, winning title after title. However, it wasn't an easy road for Norm, and before he reached this peak, he had some big challenges to overcome. In fact, he actually almost fell off the PBA tour at one point, and in this video we're going to look at the problems Norm faced and how he overcame them to become an unstoppable force that dominated the tour. We're going to rewind to the year 2007 at the start of the 07-08 season. It was an extremely slow start for Norm. He was coming off the back of a season where he'd won 3 PBA titles, so he would have had high hopes for a similar level of success heading into this new season. However, problems quickly arose as he battled constant illness, which only added to the other problems he had involving a series of injuries during the first half of the season. Norm himself said that the first 3 tournaments of the season he felt healthy, but after that he had not been healthy during any PBA events. Back in the 07-08 season, the PBA Tour was still using the exemption format. Bowlers earned exemptions in various ways, for example by winning a tournament during the previous season, winning one of the 4 major tournaments, thus gaining a multi-year exemption, or placing among the top finishers in points. One of the big problems with the exemption tour is that even the best players can have a bad season for a multitude of reasons, so unless you earned a multi-year exemption by winning a major, you had to fight for your place on the tour season after season. Suddenly Norm found himself in a very precarious position as the season went on. He was just 51st in points, and this meant his tour exemption was in serious jeopardy. Norm had to somehow put all of his injury issues aside and finish the season with a flourish. This brings us to the PBA World Championship, which was held in late February 2008. Duke finally managed to get things going and made the show, and this would be his first TV appearance of the season. There were 4 players in the TV finals with 2 semi-finals and then 1 match for the title. Ryan Schaefer faced Andrew Frawley in semi-final 1, and Duke would take on Walter Ray Williams Jr. in semi-final number 2. Ryan Schaefer would advance to the championship match, and he would have to wait to find out who his opponent would be. Now, it would be natural to think Norm would struggle to get going in his first TV appearance of the season, but that was not the case. He started out with the first 3 strikes and was a little bit unfortunate to leave the 4-9 in the 4th frame. Walter Ray, on the other hand, looked completely out of sorts, leaving 2 splits in the first 4 frames. Although Norm had an early 32-pin lead, it was clear he was struggling physically with his injuries, and he also appeared to have a pretty bad cold too. But he was facing a Walter Ray who could just not get going, and a late double by Norm all but sealed things up. So a great start for Norm, and now he marches on to the title match against Ryan Schaefer. Norm had another decent start with the first 3 strikes again, but then put the next shot way wide and was lucky to just leave the 2-8, which he converted. Schaefer was playing a completely different shot. He was way left, playing the inside part of the lane, and after going high in the first, he threw 2 nice strikes, but like Norm, his 4th shot was way right of target. But he bounced back with a much better shot in the 5th. Norm struck again but was light for the 2nd time in a row on the left lane, leaving another 2-8s. Schaefer then had a disaster in the next 2 frames after going a little bit high to lead the 4-9 and then light for another split, the 2-10. However, Schaefer still had some life after Duke went right through the nose, leaving the 4-6-7. However, Schaefer could not capitalise as he just seemed to completely lose his reaction, leaving another 2-10 and then missing the pocket light once again. With a strike in the 9th, Norm Duke had done enough to win the World Championship. This performance had saved a season plagued with illness and injuries, and most importantly, it gave him a multi-year exemption for the tour, which meant he no longer had to worry about fighting for points to try and finish high up on the points list. But the season was not quite over, and there was still one more major to play for, the US Open. Luckily for Duke, he had found some form at the right time and was looking to ride the momentum from his recent World Championship win and win 2 majors in a row. Norm managed to make the show as the 3 seed and in match 1 faced Doug Kent. On the incredibly tough US Open pattern, Norm was playing very straight because, as we all know, straighter is greater. After a 10-pin in frame 1, he threw 5 straight strikes and just seemed to pure every single one. To start stringing strikes like this on the US Open pattern is not easy at all, and it just shows how well Norm was throwing the ball in game 1. Doug Kent wasn't necessarily bowling bad, he just couldn't carry as well as Norm, and he was trailing by 55 odd pins. Norm, however, left a 10-pin in the 8th and actually missed it, which is not something you see often. This brought his lead down to 43, however, even so, it was still all but over at this point. Doug needed to strike out to have any sort of chance, but left a washout. He did actually pick this up, but it would not be enough, and Duke would move on to match 2 to meet Chris Loschetter, who was seeking his first tour title after finishing runner-up 3 times. Loschetter started extremely well and put the pressure on Norm, but Norm wasn't going anywhere and got himself right in the match after getting this awesome break in the 6th frame. He just about managed to kick out the 7-pin in the 7th frame to cut the lead down to just 2 pins. Loschetter's next shot was just a pinch wide and he left a 2-pin, but did get away with one in the 8th after throwing it inside, but it held and gave him a strike. Duke, however, was just on fire and absolutely everything was falling for him. This shot was so light and yet somehow they all fell over, but he definitely made it count after throwing yet another strike in the 9th for 6 in a row and a 19-pin lead. Chris struck in the 9th, but his shot in the 10th was way right of target. However, he did make the pickup, which was crucial as it forced Norm to mark. And of course, he stepped up and got the job done, throwing his 7th straight strike. He had managed to create so much room for himself, as you can see that he was quite far inside and then went quite high in comparison to his previous shots that were mainly light hits. A 10-pin on the next shot gave him a fantastic 267 game, but you do have to feel for Loschetter, who bowled a brilliant game himself. A 245 on this pattern is a fantastic game and in most cases would have been enough for the win. Unfortunately for him, Duke was just too good and also managed to get some all-important breaks to string a lot of strikes together. Now we move on to the title match, and it's time for the 1 seed Major Mika Koivuniemi to step in and try and take Duke down. This match was an incredible battle and it was almost impossible to tell who would triumph. It seemed to keep swinging back and forth, and at one point it looked like Mika would take control of the match but couldn't carry the 4-pin, and then Norm managed to throw a turkey into the 9th frame to take a 13-pin lead. Mika couldn't strike out in the 10th after a 2-pin leave, and this meant that Norm just needed a spare to win the title. But unbelievably, he left the bucket and suddenly things aren't as straightforward. He has to make it, and it certainly is no gimme.
Told you for a reason. You see that hand kind of fan to the left? He missed it just a little bit off his hand and gets 6. Covers it perfectly.
Not done yet, but oh so close.
However, he manages to steady himself and makes the spare with no problems. He keeps it on the lane on his fill shot, and that will mean he has won 2 majors in a row. Given all of the problems he had for most of the season, it would have seemed absolutely unthinkable that he'd win 1 major, let alone back-to-back majors in the space of a month. But this ended his season on a high, and it told the bowling world he was back, and that when he's in this sort of form, he really is unstoppable. Although he got some good breaks at many times during the show, he made the US Open pattern look like a house shot at times. And one pretty amazing stat about his season is that he was actually the highest earner with around $176,000, even though he'd only played about half of the events. This US Open win meant he had completed the Triple Crown, but had also completed the PBA Grand Slam, just the 3rd bowler at the time to do so, alongside Mike Albee and Billy Hardwick. Now the season had ended, it would be time to take stock before attempting to carry forward this late surge of form that Norm had found. The first major of the 08-09 season was the World Championship, and he was looking to make PBA history by becoming the first player to win 3 major tournaments in a row. Once again, he'd make the TV finals, coming in as the 2 seed, but this event was using the semi-final format, so he would face the 3 seed Sean Rash in semi-final number 1. Rash got off to a quick start with 4 in a row, but it wouldn't be long before Duke took the lead in the match, and he kept this lead going and came up clutch in the 10th, getting all 3 strikes. This meant that he could not lose the match and that Rash would need all 3 strikes in the 10th to force a roll-off. Rash would not even get the first after this horrible break, leaving the 9-pin off a really great shot. Norm won the match and would face the winner of either Chris Barnes or Steve Jarris. Barnes would be the man to advance to the title match. Now, there's not too much to analyse in this match, quite simply because 2 things happened. Firstly, Duke just went off on one, throwing strike after strike, and secondly, Barnes really struggled to even make a game of it. In the semi-final, Barnes was playing the extreme inside part of the lane, but then early in this match he made the decision to move right and play the outside part of the lane. Obviously he felt that this was a better look, but it wasn't really giving him the results. When he did make the pocket, more often than not he could not carry. Norm Duke on the other hand was on a tear, throwing the first 7 strikes before leaving a 10-pin in the 8th. He would end up bowling a 259 game to easily win the match and seal his place in the history books. Norm Duke was officially the first player to win 3 consecutive majors. This just capped off an absolutely remarkable run where Norm truly did seem to be unstoppable. What's probably most incredible about this run of dominance is how it came completely out of the blue after such a difficult start to the 07-08 season. Unfortunately, Duke did not make the TV finals at the next major, so he could not extend his streak to 4. But as we all know, he went on to achieve so much more after this, which only cemented his place further as one of the greatest bowlers of all time. So that brings us to an end to today's video. I hope you enjoyed this little dive into the great Norm Duke. As always, I'd love to hear from you in the comment section below. Please let me know what your favourite Norm Duke moment of all time is. Let me know in the comment section. Thank you again for watching, and as always, if you have enjoyed this video, please do consider subscribing to the channel. And as always, thank you bowling fans, and see you all next time.